There is a version of you that was formed before you had any say in the matter, before you had the words to describe what was happening, before you had the power to change any of it. And that version of you, the child who adapted, who survived, who learned how to navigate a world that felt unsafe or unpredictable, is still shaping who you are today, not as a memory, not as a story you tell about your past, but as patterns so deeply embedded in how you think, how you feel, and how you relate to other people, that most of the time you do not even know they are running. Today I'm going to show you exactly what childhood trauma does to the developing brain, and 7 specific ways it shows up in your adult life that most people never connect back to where they actually came from. This is not about blame. This is about understanding. Because the patterns that childhood trauma creates are not character flaws. They are adaptations. They were intelligent responses to the circumstances you were in. They kept you safe when you needed to be kept safe. The problem is that adaptations do not know when the danger has passed. My name is Dr. Alex. I am a clinical psychologist, and the work I consider most important is helping people understand that who they are today is not simply who they are. It is partly who they learned to be, and what was learned can be unlearned, but only if you can see it clearly first. 3 years ago, I worked with a man I will call Daniel, 37 years old, successful, articulate. His 3rd long-term relationship had ended, and each of them had ended in almost exactly the same way. He would fall hard and fast, give everything, and then, at the point when real intimacy became possible, he would find a reason to leave, or push until they left him. He told me, "I want closeness, genuinely, and somehow every time it becomes possible, I destroy it." I asked him about his childhood. His father had been loving and volatile in equal measure, warm and tentacle, and then suddenly frightening, present, and then gone for days. Daniel had learned, as children learn, not through thought but through the nervous system, that love and danger lived in the same place, that getting close meant becoming vulnerable to something unpredictable, that it was safer to be the one who left than the one who was abandoned. In 37 years, he had never made that connection. The science, childhood maltreatment, which includes not just physical abuse, but emotional neglect, inconsistent caregiving, household instability, and the prolonged experience of feeling unsafe, influences brain development at specific periods, particularly during early childhood and adolescence. A 2025 systematic review published in Annals of Medicine found that childhood trauma has profound and long-term effects on both cognitive and emotional development, effects that persist measurably into adulthood even when the traumatic experiences occurred decades earlier. And a 2026 study, published in Frontiers in Psychology, found significant links between adverse childhood experiences and the development of insecure attachment patterns in adulthood. Patterns that directly shape how we relate to other people for the rest of our lives. Attachment patterns. This is the piece that explains the most. The child who grows up with a caregiver who is reliably present and responsive learns, the world is basically safe. People can be trusted. I am worthy of care. The child who grows up with an inconsistent caregiver learns, I cannot predict this. I have to stay vigilant. I have to work for love. The child who grows up with a caregiver who is both a source of comfort and a source of fear learns the most painful lesson of all. The person I need most is also the person I am afraid of. These templates, these deeply learned patterns of how to trust, how to ask for help, how to handle intimacy, become the invisible architecture of every significant adult relationship that follows. Now, the 7 signs. Sign number 1. You find intimacy both desperately wanted and deeply frightening. Not in a way you can necessarily explain, but in the pattern of what happens when relationships get close. There is a pull, genuine, real, toward connection. And then as the connection deepens, something that feels like danger, an urge to create distance, a sudden awareness of everything that could go wrong, a tendency to find fault or pull away, just as real closeness becomes available. For some, this looks like avoidance, keeping relationships at a careful emotional distance. For others, it looks like anxious attachment, clinging, seeking constant reassurance, unable to tolerate any uncertainty. For those with disorganized attachment, whose early caregivers were both comfort and fear, it can look like both at once. Wanting desperately to be close while doing everything to push people away? Daniel's pattern exactly. The next time you feel the urge to create distance in a relationship that is actually going well, ask not what is wrong with the relationship. Ask what your nervous system learned about closeness a very long time ago. Sign number 2. You live with a nervous system that is permanently set to high alert. Not in every moment, but in the background. A low-level, persistent hum of vigilance that does not fully turn off. A tendency to scan every room you walk into, to read faces for signs of threat, to notice tone of voice before content of words. This is not anxiety in the usual sense. This is the nervous system doing its job. The job it was calibrated to do in an environment where vigilance was necessary for survival. Researchers at the University of Rochester identified that the salience network, the brain's relevance filter, responsible for detecting what is significant or threatening, is measurably altered in people who experienced childhood trauma. The system was tuned under conditions of genuine threat, and it keeps running at those settings, even when the environment has changed completely. Think of a security system installed in a dangerous building that was later sold and renovated. The building is safe now, but nobody reprogrammed the alarm. It still triggers at the same thresholds, because it has no way of knowing the neighborhood changed. Sign number 3. You struggle to trust, not because you want to be suspicious, but because some part of you cannot believe that safety lasts. Things are going well, the relationship is good, and there is still a part of you waiting for the other shoe to drop, still bracing for the moment when it changes, still cataloguing quietly the evidence that things might not be as safe as they appear. This is a nervous system that learned, in conditions of genuine unpredictability, that the appearance of safety is not the same as safety. That warmth can become coldness without warning. The awareness here, when you find yourself bracing in circumstances that are objectively safe, recognize that response as the past, not the present. Your nervous system is running a prediction that was accurate once. It is not accurate now. Sign number 4. You are either very good at shutting down your emotions, or you experience them in waves that feel out of proportion to what triggered them. These are two sides of the same coin, two different adaptations to an emotional regulation system that was not properly calibrated during development. The child who is punished for crying, shamed for feeling, or taught consistently that their emotions were unwelcome, learns to shut them down. As an adult, they describe themselves as logical, steady, not emotional. But the cost is a disconnection from their own interior life that makes genuine intimacy very difficult. The child who grew up in chaos and unpredictability, who never knew what emotional register the household would be in, develops the opposite. The emotional flood arrives before the rational mind has had time to assess what actually happened. Small triggers, large responses. The 2025 Annals of Medicine Review identifies emotional dysregulation as one of the most consistent long-term effects of childhood trauma across populations. In both cases, numbing and flooding, the response is not a character problem. It is an adaptation. Sign number 5. You have spent a significant portion of your life not feeling that you are fundamentally okay. Not a specific articulable belief, but a background sense, sometimes very quiet, sometimes quite loud, that you are not quite enough, not quite worthy, not quite deserving of good things. A persistent expectation that people will eventually see through you. The 2026 Frontiers in Psychology study found that adverse childhood experiences, particularly emotional abuse and neglect, were significantly associated with core beliefs of unworthiness and the expectation of rejection in adulthood. The child who grows up being told, explicitly or implicitly, that their needs are an inconvenience, that love must be earned rather than received, does not grow up and simply discard those messages. They become the lens through which every subsequent experience is filtered. Those messages were not an accurate assessment of the child who received them. They were not an accurate assessment of you. Sign number 6. You are drawn repeatedly to familiar dynamics, even when you know they are harmful. The woman who grew up with an emotionally unavailable father, who finds herself again and again in relationships with emotionally unavailable partners. and cannot understand why she keeps choosing the same type. This is not a mystery. The brain learns patterns in childhood, and then it reproduces them, not because they are good, but because they are known. Familiar patterns feel like home, even when home was a place of pain. This is why insight alone is often not enough. You can know intellectually that you keep choosing unavailable partners. You can understand why. You can be deeply motivated to change, and still find yourself in the same place, because what drives the pattern is not the cognitive brain. It is the nervous system's deep-rooted association between a particular dynamic and the feeling of familiar. The awareness that changes this, unfamiliarity in a relationship, is not a signal that something is wrong. It is a signal that the pattern is being broken. Sign number 7, and this is the one I want to leave you with, because it contains the most hope. You are more resilient than the narrative of your own story has told you. This is not a motivational statement. It is a neuroscientific one. The same research that documents the neurobiological effects of childhood trauma also documents something equally significant. The brain's capacity for change, neuroplasticity, means that the patterns formed in childhood are not fixed and permanent. Trauma-focused interventions such as CBT and EMDR have demonstrated the ability to produce measurable neurobiological changes in adults who experienced childhood trauma. The patterns you have been living with, the hypervigilance, the difficulty with intimacy, the core beliefs about yourself, were formed in a brain that was still developing. A brain that is extraordinarily plastic. That same plasticity does not disappear in adulthood. It diminishes somewhat. Change takes longer. But the brain that was shaped by difficult early experiences is the same brain that can be reshaped by new ones. What was formed in relationship with early caregivers, in early environments, can be healed in relationship with a skilled therapist, with trusted people, with a gradually deepening relationship with yourself. I want to come back to Daniel. After 7 sessions, he said something I have never forgotten. He said, "I finally understand what I have been doing. And more than that, I finally understand why it made sense. The child I was needed that strategy. The man I am doesn't anymore." 6 months later, he was in a relationship, genuinely different from the ones before. Not because he found a different kind of person, because he had become a different kind of person, someone who could let closeness be safe. That is what this work makes possible. You are not the sum of what happened to you. You are the sum of what you do with it. Type in the comments. Which of these 7 signs felt most familiar? The one that made you recognize something you had not been able to name before? I read every comment. If you have a question, ask it here. If this video helped you understand something you have been carrying for a long time, share it with one person today. Subscribe for a new video every week. Next week, varme. Why you keep repeating the same relationship patterns even when you can clearly see them happening? The specific mechanism and the specific work that actually breaks the cycle. I will see you there. I am Dr. Alex. What happened to you is not who you are, and the distance between those two things. That is where healing lives.